So, is China the... Hello. Yeah. Yeah. So, is China the real land of the free? I know this might sound quite absurd to a lot of people out there, and you might think, what kind of a title is that? What is he on about? Bear with me on this, because I got a couple of things to say here. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is actually personal freedoms. I know it might sound a little weird, but you can get away with almost anything in public in China. And I mean it, like, you can smoke anywhere you want if that's your thing. Although the laws are in place, you know, it doesn't matter. I can walk around drinking in public if I so choose, you know, making a fool out of myself. I could run around half naked out here if I wanted, screaming and dancing and singing, and nobody would stop me. That's just the way it is. It's a great thing, but it's also a really bad thing, as you'll see later on in the video. But unless you do something incredibly outrageous, and I mean over-the-top outrageous, you're not going to get stopped. And this also rolls over to traffic, and of course jaywalking. The fact that you know, you can jaywalk, no one's going to stop you, you're not going to get a ticket. I'm not suggesting you do, but you can. You can just walk over any road you want. And you know, actually it's on the onus of the cars to not hit you. You know, that's the way the law works here. But you know, you jaywalking, you know, there have been cases of, you know, people walking over the highways, pushing their children in their baby prams over the highways, and then a truck hits them, and then it's the truck's fault. So, you know, you could do that kind of thing. And of course, it relates to traffic as well. You can get away with doing anything in traffic here. So yeah, being able to just go out in public and kind of do what you want is one of the major freedoms that you see in China, but you won't see in a Western country. And that really all comes down to how the law is enforced. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is cost of living. Now, the thing about China is it can be incredibly expensive to live here if you choose to live a sort of a posh Western lifestyle. But as I've explained in plenty of videos before, including on ADV China, you can live here very cheaply. And I mean it. Like, you could get an apartment that costs you $150 a month to rent. Your food's going to cost you about $100 a month if you want to eat cheap. And so if you're earning even a very basic salary as like an English teacher, low-level English teacher, you can live like an absolute king. It gives you the freedom to go out and have a meal in a restaurant every day. It gives you the freedom to go on holidays and travel and also save. So there's the financial freedom. And also the fact that the debt is not really a part of society here, unless you're buying property, of course. People don't like credit cards, and so it's reflected in everything here. And you can learn some good habits and end up saving a lot of money too. So the financial freedom is massive here. The next thing I'm going to talk about, of course, is the freedom of dating and partying and things like that. You know, there's this kind of combination of being away from home and away from all the people you know that really kind of makes people let loose. And China's a great place for that, because not only do you have access to some seriously first world clubs, and it's no joke when I say that the nightclubs here are, at least in the big cities, are far more advanced than the nightclubs that you get in the West. It's no joke. Like, they'll have these amazing big sort of screens all over the place. You've got these really beautiful dancers that will dance all over, live singers, just incredible lighting and sound systems. You know, it's the kind of thing that when I first got to China years ago, I thought was pretty amazing. Of course, I've grown out of clubbing years ago, and you won't catch me dead in one of those places. You've got this combination of being away from home, cheap alcohol, warning, a lot of it's fake, as you'll find out later, and of course these amazing clubs. And then you've got all these exotic and beautiful girls, if you're a foreigner like me anyway, you know, because if they're not the same as you, they're exotic. Dating is also very easy as a foreigner because you're exotic, and so you're attractive to the local Chinese girls, and a lot of them will expect you to be rich because you're a foreigner. I've made videos about this. Everybody gets pissed off at me when I make these videos, so I'm just going to link our Chinese girls easy. And that's a question, not a statement. Go check it out and you can get the full lowdown on all of that nonsense. Anyway, it's easy. Partying, dating, the freedom to do it is there. Now it's time to talk about some of the consequences to these freedoms. Let's talk about the consequences to the whole personal freedom thing. Although it's awesome to be able to kind of just go out and do whatever you want and express yourself and be who you are, this unfortunately doesn't stop people from being a constant nuisance in public. And I mean it, like people will come and drive onto the sidewalk with their crappy little barbecue stalls and start cooking there, or they'll make massive amounts of noise all time of day and night without any consideration to anyone else. And literally they'll just be noisy. They'll start trashing things outside your window so they can recycle them, or you'll have people just causing a huge ruckus at 2 a.m. in the morning. It can be very annoying. And of course you have to deal with people constantly spitting in public right in front of you, on the street you're walking on, and even worse, sometimes in the mall. And you have to deal with, of course, grandmothers and grandfathers allowing the grandchildren to urinate in public. And this kind of thing. Basically, because it's so easy and free to do whatever you want, people are very inconsiderate and they just do whatever they want. And so you'll find people just sleeping on the sidewalk. You'll find people just making a huge mess, tossing their litter everywhere, that kind of thing. So this personal freedom thing comes with some massive, massive consequences. And of course, that goes into traffic as well. If you're driving a car, you have people jaywalking from all directions. And of course, the traffic is just insane. People driving the wrong way on the highway, stopping in the middle of the highway, doing all sorts of weird things. Like I said, there's an episode all about that coming up. So we'll save that for another time. But yeah, there's a lot of consequences to that. Right, let's talk about the consequences to the low cost of living. Might seem a little bit weird, but there are some. And the first one, of course, is food safety. And when you're buying cheap food, because food is incredibly cheap in China, it's unfathomable. The fact that you can actually eat out cheaper than cooking for yourself. And this is true, I've proved it tons of times. I can go to some pikey little restaurant here and I can actually spend as low as 5 RMB on a meal that fills me up. And that's ridiculous. That's less than $1. And it's a lot of food. I can go around and live on almost nothing. But there's a reason why that stuff's cheap. It's probably like really bad stuff, expired or poisoned, or some kind of diseased meat that was sold for really cheap, or there are all these scandals all the time. Some kind of fake food, recycled oil, the digoyo, the gutter oil. There's a reason why this stuff is cheap. If you want to eat healthy in China, it's actually very difficult. I know it sounds counterintuitive, because you can go to the wet markets and you can buy fresh vegetables and fresh meat and it's pretty cheap. However, where are the fresh vegetables coming from? Where is the fresh meat coming from? There's no oversight. Nobody knows. There's no health regulator sitting there and saying, oh yeah, this is passed, we've tested this meat, we've tested these vegetables. No, just some random granny or whatever is growing this stuff in her backyard in amongst the sort of chemical spills from a factory or whatever. And there you get your lovely fresh vegetables, but they're laced with sort of cancer-inducing chemicals. It's the way it works here. And there's a huge problem with this kind of stuff, and that's why everything's so cheap. So to eat healthy, the only way you can guarantee that you're eating healthy is to basically buy produce from overseas. I don't do that. I'm not that rich. I can't afford to import all my food. I'm just saying that's the way to do it. And that's why you have this massive milk powder thing going on around the world, where Chinese people are buying up the world's milk powder, and that's because they can't trust to feed their babies anything that's manufactured locally. And it's not just due to that scandal, it's because everybody knows the score. They're not foolish. They understand, if you want good quality, you have to get it from overseas, which is a damn shame. It's a shame. It's a huge shame when an entire society cannot trust itself to produce something healthy enough to feed to their own children, that they have to outsource it from different countries. It's a massive shame, Now I have to be fair and say that this isn't, of course, a blanket statement. You can get, and you do get these days, a lot more very nice restaurants popping up all over the place, which you can tell they've got good quality control and health standards applied. A lot of them bringing in sort of imported ingredients, things like that. But I'm talking about the low cost of living, and that doesn't apply, because as soon as you go to these expensive restaurants, you're paying very often more than Western prices just to have that peace of mind that you're having something that's, you know, not filthy. So that's the consequence for low cost of living. Of course, you know, other consequences when you rent those cheap buildings, you know, usually there's not a lot of stability in your rent. You can get kicked out at any minute. The cheaper buildings tend to be in the worse areas, and in those worser areas you tend to have a lot more pollution, because the reason it's cheap to live out there is because no one wants to live out there and there are factories everywhere. So again, if you want to live a healthy lifestyle, it's going to cost you a lot of money here, because then you're going to be paying not $150, but more like $1,000 for your rent for a semi-decent place. And you know, you can pay a lot more than that if you want to really live nicely. And then on top of that, of course, you have to pay for your expensive imported food. So yeah, you know, cost of living, those are the consequences. Now we're going to have to get serious here for a minute, guys, because the thing that people probably thought at first when watching this video is like, how on earth can he say that China is the real land of the free? Because we all know China's this sort of communist place with all these human rights violations and all this, you know, sort of nonsense going on all the time. And the fact of the matter is, on paper, China's a terrible, terrible place. If you look at the laws here, they're so restrictive, you know? If you were to just look at China from a point of view of, you know, their laws and what you perceive society to be here, of course it would look like an awful place. By law, you're not allowed to drink in public here. You would never know because everybody does. By law, you're not allowed to set up your little cart on the side of the road and cook in public. You know, by law, you're not allowed to do a lot of things. In fact, if you were to follow the rule of law in China, you'd be able to do nothing. It's so restrictive. But it's all down to the fact that the laws are never enforced. And although they are selectively enforced, by and large, you won't see enforcement of the law. So that's why you get people going out there causing a big, you know, scene on the street and nothing happens, right? That's why you can have like stupid drunken foreigners stumbling around the roads and nothing happens. That's why you can have this pseudo-free lifestyle where you can literally get away with doing whatever you want, live like a king, think you're some kind of special, you know, amazing hero, Marco Polo wannabe guy. So a lot of people go through that weird thing when they're here, and you get away with it. China seems like an amazingly free place, but on paper it's not. And when they decide to enforce those laws, your little world, your bubble of freedom, will be shattered in an instant. And this is something that I have to drive home to you guys, because the laws in China are many, they're strict, but they're just not enforced. And I'm going to give you a solid example. You know, I've actually had to move apartments recently. And that's because, yeah, the landlord that I was renting from got greedy and wanted more rent, but way more than he should deserve. Because, you know, normally it goes up every year, but he wanted like a huge amount, because he said, well, if he redoes the apartment, you know, if he does all the decoration again, he can rent it for, you know, quite a substantial amount more. But we just weren't prepared to pay the extra amount, and besides, to redecorate the apartment is going to cost him so much money, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, long story short, because I had to move, I had to register with a new police station. And this is a law, okay? A lot of foreigners ignore this law, but you shouldn't ignore this law. You are supposed to be registered within 24 hours of coming into China with the local police station that you live, like the area that you live. So if your apartment is in, you know, Luohu area, you have to find a local sort of Luohu police station for your little district, and you have to go there and register. And normally that means you have to bring your rental contract, your passport, all that kind of stuff, and they kind of put you in the system. But the law also states that every time you go out of China and come back in, you have to kind of go to that police station, you have to sort of check in and say, yeah, I'm back. And then give them a copy of your new entry stamp in your passport. Now, where I've been living before, I've been going in and out of Hong Kong without an issue. But after registering at the new place, every time I went out and came back in from Hong Kong, I'd get a phone call and they'd say like, why haven't you come down to the station? Luckily the guy's reasonable, and so he just sort of demanded that I send a photo of the new passport stamps to him, and then he's like, okay, no problem, so he can enter me into the system, which is kind of weird because the system knows I've come in, gone out and come back in, but they want like a physical photocopy or picture of the entry stamps. It's kind of annoying. So I asked my wife to like speak to the guy on the phone when he called me again and say just like, is it really necessary? Because I come in and out of Hong Kong quite frequently. In fact, in a week I'd come in and out 3 times, and each time he's phoning me, I have to go send him pictures or whatever. So she spoke to him, and apparently in the area where I've now moved, well, I'm kind of in the process of moving all my bags and stuff, so I'm kind of half living here, half living there. But anyway, in the new area that I've moved to, they have been given a directive, an order, the local police station, to go and check on foreigners twice a month. And that means if there's a foreigner living there, they actually have to go knock on the door, take a look at the passports, make sure everything's in order, twice a month. Now you see, that doesn't sound like a very free sort of a society, does it? Where living in a neighborhood, the police have to come to my door twice a month to check up on me just because I'm a foreigner, right? That doesn't sound very nice and free and open, is it? And that's the big difference, is that China is free and has a massively open, free society where you can do what you want and get away with everything. But when they decide to enforce the laws, it's not free. You feel incredibly constricted, you feel very unwelcome, and your little freedom bubble pops like that. So this thing about them coming to checking up on me, it's just the directive for that area. And of course it probably has a lot to do with my passport as well, since I'm South African, and China's very openly discriminatory towards African people in general. So yeah, it sucks. But it's happened to me before in other apartments where they come and knock on my door. It just sucks that they have to come twice a month now. So that's really the be all and the end all of this video. I would like to say that yes, China's an incredibly free place. It is, it still is. But how long that freedom lasts, it's anyone's guess. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. And as always, you know the drill. Stay awesome. Look. What, this is super what? Oh, the dead rat?